Why does the Chronicler repeat David's charge for Solomon to build the temple? This is a question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 1 Chronicles on walking through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 1 Chronicles chapter 28, verses 1 to 10, but before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 1, but if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 1 Chronicles chapter 28, beginning at verse 1. Now David assembled at Jerusalem all the leaders of Israel, the officers of the tribes and the captains of the divisions who served the king, the captains over thousands and captains over hundreds, and the stewards over all the substance and the possessions of the king and of his sons, with the officials, the valiant men, and all the mighty men of valor. Then King David rose to his feet and said, "Hear me, my brethren and my people. I had it in my heart to build a house of rest for the ark of the covenant of the Lord and for the footstool of our God, and had made preparations to build it. But God said to me, You shall not build a house for my name, because you have been a man of war and have shed blood. However, the Lord God of Israel chose me above all the house of my father to be king over Israel forever, for he has chosen Judah to be the ruler. And of the house of Judah, the house of my father, and among the sons of my father, he was pleased with me to make me king over all Israel. And of all my sons, for the Lord has given me many sons, he has chosen my son Solomon to sit on the throne of the kingdom of the Lord over Israel. Now he said to me, It is your son Solomon who shall build my house and my courts, for I have chosen him to be my son, and I will be his father. Moreover, I will establish his kingdom forever, if he is steadfast to observe my commandments and my judgments, as it is this day. Now therefore, in the sight of all Israel, the assembly of the Lord, and in the hearing of our God, be careful to seek out all the commandments of the Lord your God, that you may possess this good land, and leave it as an inheritance for your children after you forever. As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father, and serve him with a loyal heart and with a willing mind, for the Lord searches all hearts and understands all the intents of the thoughts. If you seek him, he will be found by you, but if you forsake him, he will cast you off forever. Consider now, for the Lord has chosen you to build a house for the sanctuary. Be strong and do it." We have now come to the final section of 1 Chronicles, 2 chapters that will outline the final stage of David's reign over Israel. Remember, the chronicler didn't give us the entirety of David's reign. We have 2 Samuel for that. Rather, he gave us the key points that showed that God had anointed David a mighty king over Israel, through whom the Messiah would come. And as king, David organized Israel both as a nation and as a people who worship Jehovah. This organization would have been necessary to understand for those returning from captivity in Ezra's day, for they weren't going to be making up their own religion, but continuing the service that had been instituted since the days of David, but without the idolatry that the kings who came after David added to it. Thus, showing what the temple worship was supposed to look like was important if Israel was to serve God. As we come to chapter 28, it appears that we have somewhat of a repeat of the thoughts of chapter 22. However, if you look closely, you'll notice that although the material is largely a repeat, the audience is different. Back in chapter 22, we had David explaining to Solomon that he would be king, and how that meant that he should serve the Lord as David did. We have David explaining to Solomon why David wasn't allowed to build the temple, but Solomon would. Chapter 22 is therefore a private conversation between David and Solomon. Chapter 28, though, gives us a similar conversation that David had among the rulers of Israel that had been appointed during his reign, some of which we covered in chapter 27. David tells them that he had a heart to build the temple to God, but because he had been a man of war, God told him that he wouldn't build the temple. His son, whom the Lord had chosen to be king after him, would. Now, this statement provides some intriguing details as it concerns what we studied at the beginning of 1 Kings. If you recall, back in 1 Kings 1, Adonijah, David's oldest son, attempted to seize the throne before David died because David is sickly. Adonijah gained quite a following, and this coup would have likely succeeded at least for a time if it weren't for the actions of Nathan and Bathsheba in getting David to formally anoint Solomon as king before he died. What we will see in chapter 29 is that this conversation with the people occurs after Solomon was made king following Adonijah's attempted coup, and so probably a couple years later from the events of chapter 22. Whether the people of Israel knew beforehand that Solomon was to be king following the death of David, we don't know. But what we do know is that David told the people is that God hadn't chosen Adonijah. He had chosen Solomon, just as he had chosen David from among his brothers to be king and not Eliab, Jesse's oldest son. David told Israel that God would establish Solomon's kingdom forever if he is steadfast to observe God's commandments and judgments. This promise was again conditional on obedience, which is why God was still faithful to his promise to David when he rent part of the kingdom from Solomon because of his sin, something that would occur during the days of Rehoboam, Solomon's son. God kept his promise to David that a king would sit on his throne forever, for that was a messianic promise. But he also kept his promise as it concerned the earthly reign from the house of David, for that was always conditional on obedience to God. And since many of the kings who followed David would end up being wicked, that's why Judah would suffer, eventually leading to their captivity. If only Solomon had been faithful his entire life instead of marrying foreign women who led him away from God and towards idolatry, how history might have changed. But alas, history is what it is. We cannot change the past, and neither could the returning captives. But what they could do is learn from David and Solomon about the blessings that come with righteously serving God and the punishments that come from disobedience. We'll conclude chapter 28, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 1 Chronicles chapter 28, verses 11 to 21, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.